Please subscribe and hit the notification bell to join our community and never miss a story that inspires. The words landed with a weight of sacrilege, hanging in the opulent air like smoke in a silent, gilded cathedral, impossible, absurd, and profoundly, personally offensive. Tiffany Ward, a woman whose entire existence was meticulously ordered by power, precision, and an iron will, blinked once, slowly, as if her mind struggled to process a foreign language, an alien concept. Her perfectly manicured fingers, each adorned with a flawless diamond that shimmered with subdued light, froze mid-air around the delicate stem of the crystal wine glass she had been about to sip. The flickering candlelight from the bespoke candelabra, casting dancing shadows on the walls of the exclusive private dining room at La Lumiere, caught the diamond studs on her ears, reflecting a cold, sharp glint across her piercing, steel-gray eyes. Every meticulously arranged detail of the room, from the soft, custom-woven velvet drapes that framed the city lights to the pristine gleam of the sterling silver cutlery, seemed to amplify the sheer, audacious insolence of the man's statement, making it impossible to ignore. Across from her, positioned just beyond the plush velvet rope that subtly yet definitively separated the elite guests from the discreet staff, stood a figure who seemed entirely out of place in this tableau of refined wealth and untouchable privilege. He was a man in a janitor's uniform, worn but meticulously clean, holding a mop that in that moment seemed less a cleaning tool and more a blunt, symbolic weapon. His expression was neither pleading nor timid, traits she was accustomed to seeing in those who approached her. It was simply, starkly sincere, devoid of any expectation, fear, or hidden agenda. He simply was, present and unyielding, a stark contrast to her perfectly composed world. Tiffany, a veritable queen in her own meticulously curated empire, slowly tilted her head, her perfectly sculpted lips, usually set in a firm, authoritative line, now curling into a slow, disbelieving smile that held no warmth, only a chilling contempt. "You want to what?" she finally articulated, her voice a clipped whisper of incredulity, each syllable laced with a potent dose of disdain that could usually wither any opposition. The man, Caleb Miller, took a measured step forward, his movements deliberate and unhurried, yet purposeful. He leaned the mop gently against the nearest wall, its sudden absence from his hand subtly transforming him from a menial laborer into a messenger of an inconvenient, deeply unwelcome truth. "I want to help you walk again, Miss Ward. Truly walk, not just dream of it." The soft, instrumental jazz music drifting imperceptibly from the main restaurant outside, usually a soothing background hum, abruptly faded into an indistinct, muted drone, swallowed entirely by the sheer intensity of the moment. Even the low, constant pulse of the city, a distant companion beyond the tall, sound-insulated glass-paneled walls, seemed to vanish. All that remained was the steady, almost suffocating tension that crackled between them, an undeniable clash of wills. Tiffany laughed. Not politely, not kindly, and certainly not with genuine humor. She laughed the way only a woman with more power than mercy could wield, short, sharp, and designed to cut, to dismiss, to utterly obliterate any perceived challenge to her authority or her reality. "You're a janitor," she stated, her words clipped and precise, each syllable dripping with an incredulity that bordered on outright insult. "Do you now offer spinal surgeries with floor wax and industrial-strength bleach? Perhaps a mop-handle rehabilitation program?" Her steel-gray eyes bored into him, challenging him, daring him to break, to flinch, to show any sign of weakness or embarrassment. Caleb didn't flinch. His composure was absolute, unwavering, a bedrock of calm against her storm of derision. His gaze, steady and unflinching, met hers directly. "No, Miss Ward. I offer something your esteemed doctors, with all their advanced degrees, state-of-the-art equipment, and countless tests, haven't." "And what, pray tell, would that be, Mr. Miller?" she asked, her voice laced with heavy sarcasm, as she leaned back further into the plush comfort of her custom-designed, state-of-the-art wheelchair. Its elegant lines and luxurious materials were, for her, wrapped in a cruel, daily irony, a constant reminder of her perceived imprisonment. "A miraculous cure found in cleaning supplies." The corner of his mouth twitched, a fleeting, almost imperceptible hint of a suppressed, knowing smile, but he stayed composed, his gaze steady, unwavering, and deeply penetrating. "Perspective, Miss Ward. A different kind of vision." Tiffany narrowed her eyes, her immense patience, a commodity as precious and finite as her time, rapidly depleting into a simmering fury. "You've got 5 seconds, Mr. Miller, to turn around and walk out of this room before I press this button and have security escort you out. I don't care how many floors you've mopped in this building or what misplaced sense of heroism you might harbor. This is my private space, and your intrusion is unacceptable." "I've only mopped yours, actually," Caleb replied, his voice calm, an unsettling ripple of intimate, unwelcome knowledge embedded in his words. "Specifically, this private dining room, your executive office suite, and the hallway outside your penthouse suite in the Ward Tower. 3 nights a week, for the last 8 months, like clockwork." That quiet, unexpected detail, so specific and personal, seemed to pierce her carefully constructed shield, silencing her with its sheer, unnerving intimacy. Caleb didn't blink. His deep brown eyes held her gaze, calm and relentlessly honest, not invasive, not reverent, just devastatingly real, stripping away her defenses layer by layer, exposing the raw vulnerability beneath. "And in those 8 months," he continued, his voice softer now, yet carrying an undeniable weight of meticulous observation, "I've seen more about you than your mirrors will ever admit. More than your closest confidantes, more than your most trusted staff. I've seen the patterns nobody else bothers to see." Tiffany's hand, still clutching the crystal wine glass, slowly, deliberately lifted toward the discreet call button subtly integrated into the edge of the table, the same button that, with a single press, summoned her private maitre d' or a team of security guards with silent, efficient speed. Her manicured fingers hovered over it, poised to end this absurd, infuriating, and deeply unsettling intrusion. "You've got 3 seconds now, Mr. Miller," she warned, her voice tight with controlled fury, barely masking the tremor of a profound disquiet beneath. "You pretend not to feel your legs, Miss Ward," Caleb said quietly, his voice a low, insistent whisper that somehow penetrated the very core of her being, bypassing her formidable mental defenses. He spoke before she could press the button, before she could regain full control of the narrative. "But they move when you're angry. Subtle. Fast. So fast you don't even notice it yourself. But they do move. A flicker of life, an unconscious protest." Tiffany's finger froze over the button, suspended in a moment of stunned, visceral disbelief. A cold tremor, not of fear of him, but of something far more unsettling, a profound, unsettling recognition of a hidden truth ran through her. He nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly, his gaze unwavering. "Like just now, when I mentioned walking again, your left foot flinched. Not a conscious action, but a reflex. Reflexive, not imaginary. A raw, undeniable, unconscious response from a body still capable of movement." "I'm calling someone," she said, her voice low and tight, laced with an unfamiliar, almost desperate tremor. "This is an invasion." "I'm not here to blackmail you, Miss Ward," Caleb replied, his empathy unwavering, his tone gentle yet unyielding, an anchor in her storm. "I'm here to offer genuine help, not leverage." "No," she snapped, her composure finally shattering, revealing a raw, potent sliver of pain and fury beneath the polished anger. Her voice rose slightly, an uncharacteristic breach of her usually flawless control. "You're here to insult me in my own silence. You think because you mop floors and happen to notice something the so-called experts, the world-renowned specialists, didn't, you get to play prophet. You think you understand my pain, my paralysis, my life? I think because I watched someone I love come back from a place even darker than this," he said, his voice softening, imbued with a profound, shared understanding that resonated with authentic suffering. "A place of complete, soul-crushing despair. And I know the way out. I know the first steps. Even if you don't want to see it yet. Even if you're terrified of what it might mean to try." A flicker, lightning fast and almost imperceptible, crossed her face. Most would have missed it, dismissed it as a trick of the candlelight. But Caleb, with his honed ability to perceive the unspoken, the deeply hidden, saw it clearly. Fear. Not of him, not of physical danger, but of something far more terrifying to her carefully constructed, controlled world. Hope. The terrifying possibility of a different reality. "I don't want your hope," she whispered, the words barely audible, laced with a bitter, profound desperation that spoke of years of internal struggle, of having that hope dashed countless times. "It's a cruel, deceptive lie." "I know," he said gently, his voice a soothing balm against her raw vulnerability. "But it's still yours whether you want it or not. It's an inherent part of you, Tiffany Ward. A flame that still flickers, however dimly, beneath all the layers you've built." Tiffany looked away for the first time in their confrontation, her gaze drifting toward the rain-streaked window, blurring the vibrant, indifferent cityscape of New York outside. The city pulsed as usual, chaotic, fast, utterly heedless of the profound, quiet drama unfolding within the glass walls. Inside, everything had stilled. The very air seemed to hold its breath. She set her crystal wine glass down with a faint clink against the marble table, the sound unnervingly loud in the sudden, profound silence. "What's your name?" she asked again, her voice unexpectedly softer, devoid of its usual sharp edges, tinged now with a reluctant, almost desperate curiosity. "Caleb Miller." She nodded once, a subtle, almost involuntary concession, a significant crack in her armor. "And what exactly do you want in return for this unsolicited generosity, Mr. Miller?" The question was a challenge, an ingrained assumption of ulterior motives, because in her cutthroat world, everything, absolutely everything, had a price, a hidden cost, a transaction. He hesitated, a thoughtful pause stretching between them, as if weighing the true cost of his offer. "Then nothing," he finally replied, his voice firm, unwavering, completely disarming. She laughed again, this time quieter, sadder, the sound tinged with a profound weariness that spoke of deep, emotional exhaustion, of a cynicism born from harsh experience. "There's always a price, Caleb. Always. You don't give away something for nothing in this life. No one does." "Not for me," he replied, his voice suddenly distant, filled with the echo of a profound, past burden, a sacrifice already made that transcended monetary value. "I already paid mine. A long time ago, Miss Ward, and the cost was immeasurable. Too high for any check to cover." Before she could ask what that cryptic, heavy statement meant, before she could probe the depths of his own pain, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small, plain white card. It bore just his name and a simple, unadorned number printed in a clean, legible font. He walked forward, stopping just short of her table, respecting the invisible boundary, and placed it gently beside her untouched dessert plate. "I'll be here, cleaning these floors until the end of the month, Miss Ward. After that, I don't know where I'll be, but if you ever decide to stop pretending, if you decide you want to try, truly try, call me." He turned, his back to her, and began to walk away, leaving her with the stark choice, the daunting possibility. "You know, I could have you fired," she said, her voice cutting through the space behind him, sharp with a final, desperate assertion of control, a last-ditch attempt to restore the familiar, predictable order of her world. Caleb paused, but didn't look back. His shoulders remained squared, his posture resolute. "I know." "Why would you risk that?" "For me?" she pressed, her voice cracking slightly, touched by an unfamiliar, unsettling vulnerability, a desperate need for an answer that made sense in her transactional, cynical world. "A stranger." "Because someone once did the same for me," he said, his voice low, imbued with profound, selfless gratitude. "Someone saw me when I felt utterly invisible. Someone believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. And it saved my life, Miss Ward. It showed me the way back from my own darkness." And then he walked out, past the plush velvet curtain, past the bewildered maitre d' who looked like he wanted to speak, but didn't dare, past the curious glances of the remaining patrons, and disappeared into the quiet hum of the back hallway, leaving Tiffany Ward utterly alone with the echo of his words, the unsettling promise of hope, and a simple white card that held the key to a frightening, uncertain future. Tiffany sat utterly still for a long time, the janitor's words replaying in her mind, his quiet defiance and profound empathy a stark counterpoint to her internal chaos. She didn't touch the card, didn't crumple it in anger, didn't throw it away in a fit of pride. It simply lay there, an inert object pulsing with potential. When her driver finally wheeled her back to the waiting luxury car that night, she found her fingers instinctively tightening around something in her coat pocket. It was the card. She hadn't remembered consciously putting it there, but it was there, a tangible, almost magnetic connection to the man who dared to see her, to challenge her, to offer a possibility she had long deemed extinct. The first, impossibly fragile seed of change had been planted, irrevocably altering the carefully cultivated barren landscape of her life, and she knew, with a chilling certainty, that her world would never be the same. The wind whispered through the cracked window of Caleb's small apartment in a quiet corner of the city, carrying with it the crisp scent of late autumn wet asphalt, distant chimney smoke curling against the bruised sky, and the faint, sweet aroma of roasted peanuts from the street cart below. He leaned against the worn kitchen counter, cradling a chipped mug of herbal tea, its warmth a small comfort against the chill that permeated the old building. At the table, his daughter Emma, a vibrant splash of color and boundless energy, colored quietly in her worn sketchbook, her socked feet swinging rhythmically beneath the chair, a soft hum escaping her lips. "You were late tonight, Daddy," she said without looking up, her voice soft but sure, imbued with the uncanny perceptiveness of a child. "Got caught in a conversation, kiddo," Caleb replied, taking a slow sip of his tea, the taste of chamomile a familiar comfort. He glanced at the small, playing card still tucked in his back pocket, the memory of Tiffany Ward's cold, steel-grey eyes, now tinged with a flicker of raw fear, replaying in his mind. Emma paused, her crayon hovering mid-air over a vibrant drawing of a fantastical beast. Her bright, inquisitive eyes lifted to meet his, holding something older, wiser than her 7 years suggested. Was it with that lady again? Her innocent question was surprisingly direct. Caleb didn't answer right away, the image of Tiffany's elegant, yet haunted, face superimposed over the memory of the boardroom. Emma, sensing his pause, offered her own observation, delivered plainly, without judgment. She said, "Daddy, I saw her last week, in her car outside. She looks like she forgot how to smile." Caleb smiled faintly, a bittersweet expression. "Some people carry heavy things you can't see, Emma. Things that make their smiles hide away." His hand paused on the mug, the warmth of the ceramic no longer quite reaching his fingers, his thoughts drifting to a different woman, a different, profound sadness. "Like Mommy." He nodded slowly, a deep, internal ache resurfacing. "Yeah, like Mommy." 4 years ago, Caleb Miller had stood over a sterile hospital bed, the harsh fluorescent lights illuminating a woman he loved beyond measure, watching her become a stranger to herself. Kara had been a force of nature, a sharp, fearless battlefield nurse, fiercely alive, her laughter infectious, her spirit indomitable. Until the miscarriage, a sudden, devastating blow that shattered their world. Until the silence that followed, a suffocating void that swallowed her vibrant spirit whole. Until the day she woke up and, with a chilling calm, said her legs didn't work. She simply couldn't feel them, couldn't move them. And no one, not a single specialist, could tell them why. The VAR doctors, with all their expertise and state-of-the-art diagnostic tools, ran every conceivable test. CT scans, MRIs, nerve conduction studies, blood work. Nothing. Physiologically, there was no spinal injury, no neurological damage, no discernible physical cause. They called it conversion disorder, a psychological paralysis where emotional trauma manifested physically. One weary-eyed neurologist finally admitted, with a profound sense of helplessness, "It's psychological paralysis, Mr. Miller. We can't fix what we can't see. Her mind has simply shut down that pathway." But Caleb had refused to give up, to accept that diagnosis as a final verdict. His love for Kara, his fierce hope, burned brighter than their despair. He learned everything he could, devouring medical journals, psychological texts, and alternative therapies. He sat with her for endless hours, a silent sentinel, watching her, holding her when the inexplicable tremors came, when her body convulsed with unseen pain. Slowly, agonizingly, inch by painful inch, she began to come back. It was a messy, raw, brutal process, full of setbacks, regressions, and moments of utter despair. But Caleb held the light, unwavering. And then one miraculous day, she walked again. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but she walked. She walked straight into the volunteer corps of Doctors Without Borders, her indomitable spirit reborn, determined to heal others, a testament to her profound resilience and his unwavering faith. 6 months later, a telegram arrived. Kara died in Haiti, caught in a random, senseless tragedy, wrong road, bad brakes, gone in a second. Her fierce light extinguished, far too soon. But what she left behind wasn't just a daughter, their beautiful Emma, a living testament to their love. She left behind a fire in Caleb, a quiet but fierce conviction. The unwavering belief that some wounds don't bleed, but they break you all the same. And sometimes, only someone who has been profoundly broken knows how to help rebuild another. It was this deep-seated empathy, this hard-won wisdom, that had compelled him to speak to Tiffany Ward. Back at La Lumiere, in the opulent townhouse that was her gilded cage, Tiffany Ward sat alone in the dark. She hadn't called anyone, hadn't spoken a word since her driver had dropped her off hours ago. The townhouse was quiet, always was. Designed meticulously to her exacting specifications, it boasted pristine angles, soaring glass walls, and automatic everything lights, climate control, security systems. No clutter, no distraction, no warmth. It was a monument to control, a fortress against the unpredictable messiness of life. She rolled her custom wheelchair slowly down the long, silent hallway towards a full-length mirror. its polished surface reflecting the faint light from the city outside. Her reflection stared back at her, impeccably dressed, posture composed, hair perfect, a mask of unyielding strength. And yet, she couldn't stop staring at her legs, motionless beneath her elegant gown. Reflexes, she muttered, scoffing at the thought, trying to dismiss Caleb's observation. What does he know? A janitor. But something in her chest was twitching, a nervous flutter she couldn't quite suppress. It wasn't anger. Not quite. It was recognition. A chilling, undeniable recognition. Because deep down, in a place she rarely visited, she knew Caleb Miller wasn't wrong. And worse, he'd seen something no one else had dared to say out loud, had dared to acknowledge within her carefully constructed world. She had built an empire, fought ruthless lawsuits, raised entire industries from the ground up, dominating every boardroom she entered. But the moment he looked at her, not as a broken woman, not as a victim confined to a wheelchair, but as someone still capable of wholeness, someone whose body still held a flicker of life, it shook her more profoundly than any corporate battle ever had. More than she could possibly explain. Perspective, he had said. The word echoed, unnervingly clear. She wheeled backward violently, a sudden, sharp movement, and turned towards her expansive, meticulously organized office, the only place where she still felt in control, at least on paper, at least in the world of her intellect. On her sleek, minimalist desk sat a framed photograph. Harrison, her ex-husband. God, he had been charming, brilliant, charismatic, dominating every room he entered, and cold as hell. She remembered the night of the fall, the so-called accident, with an almost visceral clarity. He hadn't even driven her to the earth. He'd just called a private car service, stayed home, and calmly resumed his dinner with 2 lawyers from the board, discussing a hostile takeover. 3 days later, he moved out of the penthouse. 2 weeks after that, divorce papers arrived. She remembered the scan results, the dispassionate medical pronouncements, no spinal injury, no nerve damage, all physiological markers normal. You should be walking, Miss Ward. But she hadn't. Not then. Not since. Not because she couldn't, but because something inside her had simply turned off, a vital spark extinguished, leaving her trapped in a silence no doctor could diagnose. 2 days later, Caleb was back on shift. He pushed his mop bucket across the polished marble floor of the main dining hall, his earbuds in, but no music playing. He preferred the rhythm of the place, the polished chaos behind the velvet curtains, the illusion of effortless elegance up front. It reminded him, strangely, of field hospital's controlled illusion, desperate calm. He didn't expect to see her again, dismissing the encounter in the private room as a fleeting moment of vulnerability. But just before 9 p.m., the maitre d', a perpetually flustered man named Jean-Pierre, pulled him aside, his face etched with a mix of awe and trepidation. "There's a request, Mr. Miller," the man said awkwardly, his voice barely a whisper. "From the woman in the VIP room. She asked for you. Specifically." Caleb arched an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his calm eyes. "Are you sure, Jean-Pierre?" The maitre d' looked genuinely spooked. "She said if it wasn't you, if another cleaner came, she would leave. Immediately." Caleb wiped his hands on a clean rag, removed his apron, and made his way towards the VIP room. Tiffany sat at the same table, in the same posture, radiating the same air of untouchable elegance. But there was something subtly different in her eyes, now softer, perhaps, but also more dangerous, more desperate. "You asked for me," Caleb said, keeping a respectful distance, his voice calm and even. "I have questions," she replied, her voice stripped of its previous contempt, now raw and direct. He nodded, a simple gesture of acceptance. "Ask away, Miss Ward." She studied him, her gaze unnervingly intense. Not like a woman examining a resume or assessing a business partner. More like a scientist evaluating an unpredictable chemical, seeking to understand its hidden properties. "Did she ever forgive you, Caleb?" The question struck deep, unexpected, and utterly personal. Caleb blinked once, slowly. "Who?" "Whoever it was you couldn't save. The one for whom you paid your price." The word struck deep, hitting a raw nerve, but he didn't flinch. He met her gaze, his own eyes holding a deep sadness, but also a profound clarity. "She didn't need to," he said quietly, his voice imbued with a quiet, hard-won wisdom. "She saved herself. I just held the light long enough for her to find the door." Tiffany looked away, her jaw tightening, absorbing the weight of his words. "What happens if I try? And I can't? What if the door stays shut for me?" Caleb stepped forward, his voice steady but gentle, his empathy a tangible force. "Then we try again, Miss Ward, and again. And if you fall, I'll be there to help you up. Every single time. And if I hate you for what you uncover, for what you force me to face," she challenged, her voice trembling. He smiled, a small, warm, and honest smile that softened the hard edges of his face. "Then I'll still be there, Miss Ward, waiting for you to stop hating yourself." Silence settled over the room, profound and absolute. And then, for the first time in 5 long, agonizing years, Tiffany Ward whispered the most terrifying words of her life. "Okay, Caleb, let's begin." The journey had just truly started. The wind whispered through the cracked window of Caleb's small apartment in a quiet corner of the city, carrying with it the crisp, poignant scent of late autumn wet asphalt, distant chimney smoke curling against the bruised evening sky, and the faint, sweet aroma of roasted peanuts from the street cart below. He leaned against the worn kitchen counter, cradling a chipped mug of herbal tea, its warmth a small, familiar comfort against the chill that permeated the old, drafty building. At the kitchen table, his daughter Emma, a vibrant splash of color and boundless energy, colored quietly in her worn sketchbook, her socked feet swinging rhythmically beneath the chair, a soft, tuneless hum escaping her lips. "You were late tonight, Daddy," she said without looking up, her voice soft but sure, imbued with the uncanny perceptiveness of a child who noticed everything. "Got caught in a conversation, kiddo," Caleb replied, taking a slow sip of his tea, the taste of chamomile a familiar, grounding comfort. He glanced at the small, plain card still tucked in his back pocket, a subtle weight against his hip. The memory of Tiffany Ward's cold, steel-grey eyes, now tinged with a flicker of raw, almost desperate fear, replaying vividly in his mind. Emma paused, her crayon hovering mid-air over a vibrant drawing of a fantastical, multi-eyed beast. Her bright, inquisitive eyes lifted to meet his, holding something older, wiser, more knowing than her 7 years suggested. Was it with that lady again? The sad one? Her innocent question was surprisingly direct, cutting through his guarded thoughts. Caleb didn't answer right away, the image of Tiffany's elegant, yet profoundly haunted, face superimposed over the memory of the opulent dining room. Emma, sensing his pause, offered her own astute observation, delivered plainly, without judgment, as only a child could. "She's sad, Daddy. I saw her last week, in her car outside La Lumiere. She looks like she forgot how to smile, like the smile is locked away." Caleb smiled faintly, a bittersweet, knowing expression. "Some people carry heavy things you can't see, Emma. Things that make their smiles hide away. Things that bury their joy." His hand paused on the mug, the warmth of the ceramic no longer quite reaching his fingers, his thoughts drifting to a different woman, a different, profound sadness that was eternally etched into his soul. "Like Mommy." He nodded slowly, a deep, internal ache resurfacing, raw and ever-present. "Yeah, like Mommy." 4 years ago, Caleb Miller had stood over a sterile hospital bed, the harsh fluorescent lights illuminating the pale face of the woman he loved beyond measure, watching her become a stranger to herself. Kara had been a force of nature, a sharp, fearless battlefield nurse, fiercely alive, her laughter infectious, her spirit indomitable, a woman who had faced down war zones without flinching. Until the miscarriage, a sudden, devastating blow that shattered their world. Until the profound, suffocating silence that followed, a void that swallowed her vibrant spirit whole. Until the day she woke up and, with a chilling, detached calm, said her legs didn't work. She simply couldn't feel them, couldn't move them. And no one, not a single specialist in the country, could tell them why. The VI doctors, with all their expertise, state-of-the-art diagnostic tools, and years of clinical experience, ran every conceivable test. CT scans, MRIs, nerve conduction studies, extensive blood work. Nothing. Physiologically, there was no spinal injury, no neurological damage, no discernible physical cause for her paralysis. They called it conversion disorder, a complex psychological paralysis where emotional trauma manifested physically, a mind's desperate attempt to protect itself. One weary-eyed neurologist finally admitted, with a profound sense of helplessness, "It's psychological paralysis, Mr. Miller. Her mind has simply shut down that pathway to shield her from overwhelming grief. We can't fix what we can't see on an MRI." But Caleb had refused to give up, refused to accept that diagnosis as a final, unalterable verdict. His love for Kara, his fierce, unwavering hope, burned brighter than their despair, a beacon in the darkness. He learned everything he could, devouring medical journals, psychological texts, and exploring alternative therapies, becoming an amateur expert in neurological recovery and trauma. He sat with her for endless hours, a silent sentinel, watching her, observing every subtle shift, holding her when the inexplicable tremors came, when her body convulsed with unseen pain. Slowly, agonizingly, inch by painful inch, she began to come back to herself. It was a messy, raw, brutal process, full of setbacks, regressions, and moments of utter despair that tested their very souls. But Caleb held the light, unwavering, his faith in her indomitable. And then one miraculous day, she walked again. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but she walked. She walked straight into the volunteer corps of Doctors Without Borders, her indomitable spirit reborn, determined to heal others, a testament to her profound resilience and his unwavering faith. 6 months later, a terse telegram arrived. Kara died in Haiti, caught in a random, senseless tragedy, a wrong road, bad brakes, gone in a second, serving others. Her fierce, vibrant light extinguished, far too soon, in a distant land. But what she left behind wasn't just a daughter, their beautiful Emma, a living testament to their enduring love. She left behind a fire in Caleb, a quiet but fierce conviction. The unwavering belief that some wounds don't bleed, don't show on a scan, but they break you all the same. And sometimes, only someone who has been profoundly broken, who has walked through the darkest valleys, knows how to help rebuild another. It was this deep-seated empathy, this hard-won wisdom, this unshakable conviction in the resilience of the human spirit that had compelled him to speak to Tiffany Ward, to offer her the same light he had once held for Kara. Back at the opulent townhouse that was her gilded, solitary cage, Tiffany Ward sat alone in the dark. She hadn't called anyone, hadn't spoken a single word since her driver had dropped her off hours ago, leaving her in the cavernous silence. The townhouse was quiet, always was, designed meticulously to her exacting specifications. It boasted pristine angles, soaring glass walls that framed the indifferent city, and automatic everything lights that anticipated her presence, climate control that maintained a perfect, unchanging temperature, security systems that locked out the world. No clutter, no distractions, no warmth. It was a monument to absolute control, a fortress against the unpredictable, messy chaos of life and emotion. She rolled her custom wheelchair slowly down the long, silent hallway, the soft whir of its wheels the only sound, towards a full-length mirror, its polished surface reflecting the faint, cold light from the city outside. Her reflection stared back at her, impeccably dressed, posture composed, hair perfect, a mask of unyielding strength and detached elegance. And yet, she couldn't stop staring at her legs, motionless beneath her elegant gown, a stark, unchanging reality. Reflexes, she muttered, scoffing at the thought, trying to dismiss Caleb's unnerving observation, to rationalize it away. What does he know? A janitor, for God's sake. But something in her chest was twitching, a nervous flutter she couldn't quite suppress, a tiny spark of unease. It wasn't anger. Not quite. It was recognition. A chilling, undeniable recognition. Because deep down, in a place she rarely visited, a place buried under layers of self-deception and pride, she knew Caleb Miller wasn't wrong. And worse, he'd seen something no one else had dared to say out loud, had dared to acknowledge within her carefully constructed, pristine world of denial. She had built an empire, fought ruthless lawsuits, raised entire industries from the ground up, dominating every boardroom she entered with an almost ruthless intellect. But the moment he looked at her, not as a broken woman, not as a victim confined to a wheelchair, but as someone still capable of wholeness, someone whose body still held a flicker of life, of potential, it shook her more profoundly than any corporate battle ever had. More than she could possibly explain or comprehend. Perspective, he had said. The word echoed, unnervingly clear, cutting through the silence of her fortress. She wheeled backward violently, a sudden, sharp, frustrated movement, and turned towards her expansive, meticulously organized office, the only place where she still felt in absolute control, at least on paper, at least in the cold, logical world of her intellect and corporate dominion. On her sleek, minimalist desk sat a framed photograph. Harrison, her ex-husband. God, he had been charming, brilliant, charismatic, dominating every room he entered, and cold as hell, a man who loved power more than people. She remembered the night of the fall, the so-called accident, with an almost visceral clarity, a raw wound. He hadn't even driven her to the earth. He just called a private car service, stayed home in their penthouse, and calmly resumed his dinner with 2 lawyers from the board, discussing a hostile takeover, already planning his next move. 3 days later, he moved out of the penthouse. 2 weeks after that, neatly filed divorce papers arrived. She remembered the scan results, the dispassionate medical pronouncements delivered by empathetic but helpless doctors. No spinal injury, no nerve damage. All physiological markers normal. You should be walking, Miss Ward. But she hadn't. Not then. Not since. Not because she couldn't physically, but because something inside her had simply turned off. A vital spark extinguished, a will to fight surrendered, leaving her trapped in a silence no doctor could diagnose or treat. 2 days later, Caleb was back on shift. He pushed his mop bucket across the polished marble floor of the main dining hall, the quiet whir of its wheels a familiar rhythm. His earbuds were in, but no music played. He preferred the subtle hum of the place, the polished chaos behind the velvet curtains, the illusion of effortless elegance up front. It reminded him, strangely, of field hospital's controlled illusion, desperate calm, a facade maintained in the face of underlying crisis. He didn't expect to see her again, dismissing the intense encounter in the private room as a fleeting moment of her vulnerability and pride. But just before 9 p.m., the maitre d', a perpetually flustered man named Jean-Pierre, pulled him aside, his face etched with a mix of awe and trepidation, his hands wringing. "There's a request, Mr. Miller," the man said awkwardly, his voice barely a whisper, filled with nervous deference. "From the woman in the VIP room, Miss Ward. She asked for you. Specifically, she insisted." Caleb arched an eyebrow, a flicker of genuine surprise in his calm eyes. "Are you sure, Jean-Pierre? She seemed quite adamant about me leaving." The maitre d' looked genuinely spooked, his eyes darting towards the VIP room. "She said if it wasn't you, if another cleaner came, she would leave. Immediately. And she sounded serious, Mr. Miller, not her usual dismissal." Caleb wiped his hands on a clean rag, removed his apron, and with a quiet resolve, made his way towards the VIP room. Tiffany sat at the same table in the same posture of untouchable elegance, radiating the same air of formidable authority. But there was something subtly, yet undeniably, different in her eyes, now softer, perhaps a hint of something fragile, but also more dangerous, more desperate, reflecting a profound inner struggle. "You asked for me," Caleb said, stopping just inside the threshold, keeping a respectful distance, his voice calm and even, betraying none of his internal speculation. "I have questions, Mr. Miller," she replied, her voice stripped of its previous contempt, now raw and direct, almost devoid of emotion, a desperate plea for answers. He nodded, a simple gesture of acceptance, his presence a steady anchor. "Ask away, Miss Ward. I'm here to listen." She studied him, her gaze unnervingly intense, not like a woman examining a resume or assessing a business partner, more like a scientist evaluating an unpredictable, volatile chemical, seeking to understand its hidden, dangerous properties, its potential for either destruction or transformation. "Did she ever forgive you, Caleb?" The question struck deep, unexpected, and utterly personal, an arrow aimed straight at his heart. Caleb blinked once, slowly, absorbing the unexpected blow. "Who?" "Whoever it was you couldn't save. The one for whom you paid your price. Your wife, wasn't it?" The word struck deep, hitting a raw nerve, opening a wound he kept carefully concealed. But he didn't flinch. He met her gaze, his own eyes holding a deep sadness, but also a profound clarity and acceptance of his past. "She didn't need to," he said quietly, his voice imbued with a quiet, hard-won wisdom that transcended personal pain. "She saved herself. I just held the light long enough for her to find the door. I was her anchor, not her savior." Tiffany looked away, her jaw tightening, absorbing the weight of his words, the profound empathy contained within them. "What happens if I try, and I can't? What if the door stays shut for me, Caleb? What if I'm too broken to be saved?" Caleb stepped forward, a few paces closer, his voice steady but gentle, his empathy a tangible, reassuring force. "Then we try again, Miss Ward, and again, and again. The human spirit is more resilient than you know. Your body is resilient." He offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "And if you fall, I'll be there to help you up. Every single time. No judgment, no pity, just unwavering support. And if I hate you for what you uncover, for what you force me to face within myself, for the pain it will inevitably bring," she challenged, her voice trembling, laced with a raw, desperate fear of the truth, of self-confrontation. He smiled, a small, warm, and honest smile that softened the hard edges of his face, radiating an almost paternal understanding. "Then I'll still be there, Miss Ward, waiting for you to stop hating yourself and to reclaim the woman you truly are." Silence settled over the room, profound and absolute, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths and the terrifying promise of self-discovery. And then, for the first time in 5 long, agonizing years, Tiffany Ward whispered the most terrifying words of her life, words that signaled a profound, internal surrender, a brave leap of faith. "Okay, Caleb, let's begin." The journey, the real, internal journey of healing, had just truly started. Caleb's words, "You didn't lose your legs. You surrendered them. You have the inherent power to reclaim what you consciously, desperately gave away," hung in the sunlit sitting room, reverberating with a truth that was both terrifying and electrifying. Tiffany stared at her reflection in the mirror, the image of the powerful executive, the woman trapped, now overlaid with the shocking revelation of her own agency and her paralysis. Her eyes flared, a sudden, fierce blaze of raw emotion. It was a mixture of anger at Caleb for daring to speak such a thing, and a profound, bone-deep terror at the dawning possibility he presented. To surrender her legs implied a choice, and choice implied responsibility, and responsibility implied the terrifying obligation to try. "But that means you can take them back," Caleb had concluded, his voice resonating with quiet power. Later that night, that single, audacious thought spun in Tiffany's mind like a dizzying, dangerous vortex. She sat at her grand piano, a silent, imposing fixture in her living room. She hadn't touched it since the week before the fall, the keys gleaming, dusted, but pristine and untouched by human hands. She stared at them like they might burn her fingers, a profound aversion to reconnecting with such a vulnerable part of her past. Then slowly, hesitantly, her perfectly manicured fingers, usually accustomed to commanding boardrooms, pressed one key. A single, tentative note, then another and another, forming a simple, trembling chord, almost discordant in its fragility. The sound, unexpected and ethereal, trembled through the vast house, echoing down long, marble hallways, brushing past cold steel and towering glass, filling the sterile space with unexpected warmth and a ghost of a past melody. And when she closed her eyes, she didn't see the wheelchair, didn't feel the weight of her immobility. She saw herself at 19, barefoot, laughing, her hair wild and unbound, playing the piano in her cramped college dorm room while her best friend sang off-key beside her, life unfiltered and uncontrolled. She saw herself vibrantly alive, brimming with unbridled joy. And for the first time in years, Tiffany Ward didn't feel broken. She just felt unfinished. The walls of her self-imposed prison, constructed of pain and pride, were beginning to crumble, note by painful, exquisite note. The park was nearly empty the following morning, blanketed in a soft, ethereal mist that blurred the trees like watercolors, softening the harsh edges of the city. Autumn had begun to scatter its riotous colors across the pathways, burnt orange, golden yellow, and the muted rust of tired leaves, ready to let go. Tiffany Ward sat alone near the duck pond, her chair parked under a crooked elm, a silent observer in the muted landscape. The crisp cold didn't bother her. She wore it like armor, a thick wool coat, gloves she hadn't needed, and large sunglasses, though there was no direct sun. She had told her assistant she needed air, a vague excuse. She didn't say she was secretly hoping, against all logic, to see him. On the far end of the park, Caleb Miller jogged up a gentle hill, his breath pluming in the cold air. Emma, a beacon of bright energy, bounced beside him, one small hand gripping his hoodie, the other dragging a beat-up, mismatched doll named Lucy. Emma had begged for a morning walk before school. "Just 10 minutes, Daddy. I want to give Lucy some fresh air," he had chuckled. "She's a doll, Emma. Dolls don't need fresh air. She's a doll who gets cold feet, Daddy. That's not how feet work," she'd corrected, tilting her head with sage disapproval. "You fix people's feelings, but you still don't get dolls." He had laughed, loud and free, a sound of unburdened joy. It was that laugh Tiffany heard first. A genuine, unadulterated sound of happiness that seemed utterly alien in her own world. She didn't turn, didn't need to. She recognized that voice now. It had been haunting her sleep since the night he had said, "Then we try again." Caleb spotted her first, a solitary figure under the elm. He slowed, instinctively not wanting to intrude, but Emma had already dashed forward, Lucy clutched in her hand, a magnetic pull drawing her towards the elegant woman in the wheelchair. Tiffany looked up just in time to see a little girl standing in front of her, her eyes wide and wondering, utterly unburdened by judgment. "I know you," Emma said brightly, her voice like a tiny bell. Tiffany blinked behind her sunglasses, a flicker of surprise in her steel-grey eyes. "Do you? You had dinner with Daddy at the fancy place," Emma declared, beaming. Tiffany arched a brow, a flicker of amusement, despite herself. Dinner? Well, Emma admitted, a child's honest passing of events. You sat and he cleaned, but I call that dinner. Tiffany smirked, a genuine, if fleeting, expression. She doesn't usually talk to strangers, Caleb said, walking up, slightly out of breath, a protective hand resting on Emma's shoulder. I think Lucy vouched for you. Emma held up the doll, its mismatched buttons for eyes, one ear barely hanging on by a thread, and a pink ribbon tied where hair used to be. It was ugly, broken, and oddly familiar. What happened to her? Tiffany asked, her gaze fixed on the doll, a rare, unprompted curiosity. Emma looked at Lucy, then shrugged with a child's simple philosophy. She's been through stuff. Why not get a new one? Tiffany inquired, a habit of seeking efficiency. Emma frowned, as if the suggestion were offensive. Because this one knows my secrets. She listens. Tiffany stared at the child for a long moment, the directness of Emma's words cutting through her practiced detachment, then reached out hesitantly. May I? Emma handed Lucy over solemnly. Tiffany held the doll in her gloved hands like it was made of fragile glass, turning it over carefully. You fixed her, she said quietly, pointing at the carefully sewn ear and the patched-up belly. I didn't want her to feel left out just because she's broken, Emma said, her voice soft but resolute. Broken things are still people. Caleb watched in silence, his chest tightening, a profound wave of emotion washing over him. Tiffany's voice was barely a whisper. Who told you that, Emma? Emma shrugged again, her innocence profound. Mommy used to say it all the time. That hit hard enough to knock the breath from Caleb. He hadn't told Emma much about Kara's illness, only that Mommy had a very sad heart that took time to heal. Apparently, his little girl had listened more profoundly, understood more deeply than he had ever realized. Tiffany gave the doll back gently, her movements slow, deliberate. Do you want her to keep you company for a while, Miss Tiffany? Emma asked, her small face filled with genuine concern. What? You look like someone who's lonely on the inside. That's worse than outside lonely, Daddy says. Tiffany blinked. The words hit her like cold wind through cracks in the window, chilling because they were devastatingly true. I don't know what to say, Emma. You don't have to, Emma said, a small, knowing smile on her face. Lucy doesn't talk much either. That's why they get along. Tiffany chuckled softly. It felt foreign in her chest, a strange, warm, alive sensation she hadn't recognized in years. Later, after Emma, with Lucy clutched close, skipped off to feed the ducks, Caleb sat on the bench beside Tiffany. He didn't say anything at first, just let the quiet settle between them, a comfortable, shared silence. Finally, she spoke, her voice still soft. She's extraordinary, Caleb, truly. He nodded, a proud, tender smile. Takes after her mum. Her spirit anyway. A beat of silence. I've never been good with kids, Tiffany confessed, a rare admission of insecurity. That's because most people forget they used to be one, Caleb replied, his gaze unwavering, full of insight. She looked at him, eyes narrowing behind the glasses, a flicker of her old sharpness. You talk like a janitor who swallowed a therapist, Mr. Miller. He grinned, a genuine, unburdened smile. I mop up more than flaws, Miss Ward. I mop up assumptions. She shook her head, but a smile, small but undeniable, tugged at the edge of her mouth. Then she reached into her coat and, with a deliberate motion, held up the doll, Lucy. Do you know what she said to me, Caleb? That broken things are still people, and that I looked lonely on the inside. Caleb nodded. She's always seen the unseen. I haven't felt like a person in years, she added, her voice dropping to a whisper, filled with a profound weariness. More like a museum exhibit. Look, but don't touch. Elegant, untouchable, unfeeling. But not unfixable. Tiffany, Caleb said gently, using her first name, a quiet, intimate shift in their dynamic. Never unfixable. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked out across the pond where Emma was now waving frantically at a cluster of ducks, a picture of uninhibited joy. I used to be that girl, Tiffany murmured, her voice distant, reflecting on a lost past. Curious, loud, brave. Before the headlines, before the stock market, before I let the wrong people define my worth and my reality. Caleb watched her, silent, a compassionate witness to her painful introspection. And now, he finally asked, his voice soft, inviting her to continue. She looked down at the doll again, a fragile symbol of resilience. I'm tired of being untouchable, Caleb. I'm tired of being unseen. I'm tired of being defined by my brokenness. That night, Tiffany placed Lucy, the broken but fixed doll, on the windowsill of her opulent bedroom. It should have looked ridiculous, a grown woman, a corporate titan, with a child's plaything. But when she pulled the curtain shut and turned off the lights, something unexpected happened. She didn't feel alone, and in the profound stillness of the night, she whispered words she hadn't spoken aloud in years, words that hinted at a terrifying, exhilarating possibility. Maybe broken isn't the end. Maybe it's just the beginning. The first true steps towards reclaiming her life were being taken, not on solid ground, but in the fragile landscape of her soul. That night, Tiffany placed Lucy, the broken but fixed doll, on the windowsill of her opulent bedroom. It should have looked ridiculous, a grown woman, a corporate titan, with a child's plaything, an incongruous splash of innocent vulnerability in a room designed for unyielding power. But when she pulled the heavy velvet curtain shut, plunging the room into shadow, and turned off the lights, something profound and unexpected happened. She didn't feel alone. And in the profound stillness of the night, with only the distant city hum as a lullaby, she whispered words she hadn't spoken aloud in years, words that hinted at a terrifying, exhilarating possibility. Maybe broken isn't the end. Maybe it's just the beginning. The first true steps towards reclaiming her life were being taken, not on solid ground, but in the fragile, reawakening landscape of her soul, fueled by a child's simple wisdom and a janitor's unwavering faith. But just as the first glimmer of light began to truly penetrate her carefully constructed darkness, something sinister stirred in the background. A harsh, unnatural light from her phone screen pierced the quiet. A message lit up from an unknown number. "You think this makes you a hero? You're still a fraud, Tiffany. Some things don't deserve second chances." The words, cold and clinical, yet laced with a deeply personal venom, were a precise, brutal strike, dissecting her deepest, most carefully buried fears with surgical accuracy. They echoed the very voice in her head that whispered her worthlessness. She stared at the screen, and suddenly her legs, which just hours ago had shown a faint tremor of life, felt heavy again, like cold, unforgiving chains, anchoring her back to the crushing weight of her past failures, her public humiliation. The fragile darkness, which she thought she had begun to push back, swirled around her, threatening to engulf her entirely. The anonymous tormentor had found her. Tiffany didn't show up for her session the next morning. It was the first time in weeks, a stark and immediate deviation from her newly established, painstakingly adhered to routine with Caleb. Caleb, arriving at the precise agreed-upon time, found the formidable wrought iron gate of her townhouse firmly shut, a cold, imposing barrier. The intercom remained silent, unresponsive to his persistent rings. He rang the bell once, then twice, the chime echoing fruitlessly in the hollow quiet. Nothing. Not even the faintest echo of footsteps on the polished marble floor she once insisted be waxed every Monday morning. His gut tightened with an unnerving premonition. This wasn't her usual defiance, her occasional sharp retorts. This was different. This was a retreat, a profound absence. Something was profoundly wrong. Not a loud wrong, not a dramatic wrong with screaming or shattered glass, but a silent wrong, the kind that weighed heavier than any scream, a palpable, suffocating absence of the subtle life he had just begun to coax back into her opulent, solitary space. Inside, Tiffany sat in the oppressive dark of her vast sitting room, the heavy velvet curtains drawn tight against the intrusive daylight, turning the opulent space into a tomb. Her phone lay face down on the silk cushion beside her, a despised object. The screen had lit up a dozen times throughout the night and morning messages from Caleb, concerned queries from her assistant, frantic calls from her chief of staff about missed appointments, and one more from an unknown number she didn't recognize, but had a chilling, sickening suspicion belonged to Emma, somehow. She hadn't moved from the couch in 2 days, trapped, paralyzed not by her legs, but by the insidious power of that single, venomous message. "You think this makes you a hero? You're still a fraud." Whoever sent it had cut straight into the bone, into the very marrow of her deepest self-doubt, reactivating every painful memory of public scrutiny and private shame. Because it wasn't just hate. It was a brutal confirmation of what she'd feared all along, that even at her most honest, most vulnerable, most exposed, she was still a performance piece to someone. A spectacle in a $15,000 chair. A woman who could move, the doctor said, but hadn't. A woman who could lead, who commanded an empire, but hadn't truly led herself anywhere meaningful, anywhere authentic, in 5 long, agonizing years. The chilling voice in her head, Harrison's cruel pronouncements, Her own self-recriminations now echoed the anonymous tormentor, amplifying her despair. When Caleb returned the next day, a quiet, resolute determination etched on his face. He didn't ring the bell. He simply waited, standing patiently on the cold flagstone, his hands in his jacket pockets, his eyes fixed on the tall, unblinking windows of the townhouse, a silent sentinel against despair, refusing to give up. And just before 10 a.m., the imposing front door cracked open, a narrow sliver of light escaping into the shadowed morning. Tiffany stood there, cloaked in a simple robe, pale, hollow-eyed, her features drawn tight, but she was standing. Barely, leaning heavily on the doorframe, her legs stiff as iron rods, trembling visibly with a sheer effort, a testament to her profound struggle, but she was standing. It was a fragile, defiant stand. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice raw, raspy, barely a whisper, a profound exhaustion lacing every syllable. It held a fragility he hadn't heard before, a vulnerability that tore at his heart, cutting through his resolve. Caleb took one long, steady breath, centering himself, allowing a question to hang in the air before he answered. "Because I didn't come this far just to be part of your before and after picture, Miss Ward. I came to finish what we started, to see you through this, whatever it takes." She flinched, the words striking a nerve, acknowledging her deep-seated fear of being a spectacle. He hadn't apologized for his bluntness. He rarely did, believing in direct truth. But his unwavering presence, his patient, steady gaze, was an apology and a promise in itself. "I'm not doing this anymore," she muttered, turning her head away, attempting to retreat into the darkness she had cultivated, the familiar comfort of surrender. "It's too much. Too painful. I can't." "Why?" he pressed gently, stepping inside, shutting the heavy door behind him with a soft click that sealed them within her fortress, cutting off the outside world. He didn't move closer, maintaining a respectful distance, allowing her space, yet never breaking connection. She paused, then quietly, without drama, a profound, gut-wrenching exhaustion in her voice, she admitted, "Because I'm terrified, Caleb. Terrified that all of this doesn't matter, that I'm fundamentally unfixable, that the effort is futile, and I'll just fall again, publicly, irrevocably." Caleb finally moved, taking a few deliberate steps, his presence a steady anchor in her storm. "You're afraid of the wrong thing, Tiffany," he said, his voice gentle but firm, cutting through her despair with surgical precision. "Oh, enlighten me, Mr. Miller," she snapped, a flash of her old imperiousness, brittle and strained, returning momentarily. "What profound wisdom does a janitor have about fear?" "You're afraid of not mattering," he said gently, ignoring her sarcasm, getting straight to the heart of her vulnerability, of her core wound. "But what you should be afraid of is never trying again. Never giving yourself the chance to matter, to heal, to live authentically." She looked at him, her eyes damp with unshed tears, her carefully constructed composure shattered, revealing the raw, exposed woman beneath. "They don't know me, Caleb. They don't know what I've lived through. The betrayals, the judgment, the constant scrutiny, that message. It just confirmed everything I already feared, that I'm destined to be forever defined by my lowest point." "Then show them," Caleb replied, his voice firm, unwavering, echoing his earlier challenge in the park. "Show them the truth, not just your pain, but your strength, your resilience, your rebirth." "I tried," she choked, a raw, desperate sound, the memory of her failed attempt at defiance still fresh. "And the moment I did, someone reminded me that my worst chapter still defines me, that I'm still a fraud, a public spectacle, not a person." Caleb walked closer, deliberately, slowly, until he could sit in the armchair directly across from her, his gaze level, compassionate, yet utterly unyielding. "Tiffany," he said, his voice low and steady, deeply resonating with his own past struggles against internal demons. "We don't get to choose who haunts us. Those voices, those judgments, whether from others or from within, they'll always be there, a part of your memory. But we do choose who we believe. We choose which voices to give power to, which narrative to embrace." She looked down, her voice breaking, a fragile whisper of profound despair. "What if the voice that haunts me is mine? What if I believe it, Caleb?" A heavy silence settled between them, deeper than words, thick with unspoken pain and the terrifying weight of self-condemnation. He nodded slowly, a profound understanding in his eyes. "Then let's teach her how to speak again, Tiffany. Let's teach that voice a new song, a song of hope, of resilience, of self-acceptance, a song that drowns out the others." They didn't do physical therapy that day. Instead, they sat on the floor, facing each other, surrounded by the quiet hum of her empty, beautiful house. Caleb brought out his wife's journal again, its leather worn at the edges, a sacred relic. He opened it to a page dog-eared with wear, a page imbued with raw courage and the triumph of the human spirit. She wrote this 3 months before she stood for the first time, he said, his voice soft, sharing a profound piece of his past, a testament to hope. Tiffany leaned in, her gaze fixed on the elegant handwriting, her own breath catching in her throat. Caleb read aloud. Today I felt a twitch, just one. But it was mine, not the doctor's, not the diagnosis. It belonged to me, Kara. And it told me, you're still in there. You're still fighting. You're still whole, deep down. Tiffany closed her eyes, absorbing the profound resonance of the words, recognizing her own struggle within Kara's. I'm tired of being a symbol, she whispered, her voice fragile. A symbol of tragedy, of brokenness, of the powerful woman who fell. I just want to be. Me, Caleb smiled faintly, a gentle, encouraging smile. Then stop being one, Tiffany. Stop being a symbol. Be a person instead. A whole, complex, messy, beautiful person, in all your brokenness and strength. She let out a broken laugh, a sound that was half sob, half profound release, a raw, guttural sound of vulnerability. That's the hardest thing anyone's ever asked me to do, Caleb. To just be. No, he said, his voice firm. It's just the first honest thing. The first step towards true freedom. Later, as he packed his bag to leave, she stood in the doorway behind him, still leaning, but subtly stronger now, her gaze holding a newfound, fragile determination. Caleb, she said softly. He turned. If I fall again, she continued, her voice trembling slightly, I don't think I'll get back up. Not this time. The fall will be too deep. He met her eyes with the kind of gaze that made you feel held, truly seen and supported, even from across a room. Then I'll sit beside you, Tiffany, he said, his voice unwavering, a steadfast promise. Until you're ready to try again, for as long as it takes. You won't be alone. That night, Tiffany stared at herself in the mirror for a long time. No makeup, no designer armor, just her skin, tired eyes, and a flicker so faint it nearly vanished, of something that looked like hope, an ember refusing to die. She reached for her phone, typed a name, Harrison, and blocked the number, severing a toxic tie. Then she opened her contacts and sent a message. Tomorrow, 9 am I'm ready. The shadows had returned, threatened to engulf her, but this time Tiffany Ward was ready to fight back, armed with a new truth and an unexpected ally. The next morning, the grand, polished doors of Tiffany's piano room, usually a silent, decorative barrier, stood wide open. The heavy velvet curtains, which typically remained drawn against the intrusion of the outside world, were now pulled back, bathing the elegant space in a soft, welcoming morning light. A gentle breeze, cool and fresh, slipped in from the terrace, rustling the sheer drapes with a delicate murmur. The yoga mat, a stark blue contrast against the gleaming hardwood, a silent symbol of their quiet battle, was already unrolled and laid flat in the exact center of the room. Tiffany was waiting, not in her wheelchair, but seated on a low, minimalist bench by the grand piano, her posture subtly straighter, her gaze fixed on the doorway with a mixture of nervous anticipation and fragile determination. When Caleb walked in, precisely at 9 am, his presence a calm, grounding force, she didn't offer a formal greeting. Her usual sharp retort was absent. She simply looked at him, her eyes holding a new, raw vulnerability beneath a fragile but undeniable resolve. I dreamt I stood in front of a crowd, she began, her voice low, a tremor of the nightmare's lingering terror clinging to her words. I was shaking. Caleb. Everyone was watching, judging, and I hated it. I was terrified. But then, in the dream, one person reached out a hand. Not to applaud, not to judge, just to hold. Just to be there, an anchor in the storm. She paused, her gaze meeting his, holding it with an intense clarity that spoke volumes of her trust. It was you, Caleb? Your hand. He walked towards her, his presence a quiet, solid anchor in the room. That session, infused with the raw honesty of her dream and the profound weight of her confession, was fundamentally different from any before. She did more than just move, she fought. Her hands trembled with effort, gripping the mat, but they did not release. Her knees locked and unlocked, protesting every micro-movement, every awakening muscle. Her breath caught in her chest, ragged and uneven, but it never fully broke. When Caleb, observing her struggle, said, "Push, Tiffany," she pushed, her jaw clenched with fierce resolve. When he said, "Breathe," she breathed, deeply, raggedly, drawing strength from the air. And when he whispered, his voice soft but unwavering, imbued with the deep conviction of his own hard-won battles, "You are not a fraud, Tiffany. You are a fighter. This is you, being real," she cried. Not because she was weak, but because something sacred, something profoundly suppressed for half a decade, had finally broken. And underneath the ruin of her fear and pride was a woman who could finally feel herself again. Not a statue, not a story the world had written for her, but just Tiffany, vibrantly, painfully, undeniably alive, shedding the layers of her self-imposed prison. The sky above Tiffany's townhouse was a soft, slate blue that morning, quiet and full of promise, mirroring the fragile new dawn within her soul. Inside, the sun streamed through the tall, panoramic windows like it had been patiently waiting for this exact moment of reawakening, flooding the sitting room with warmth and light. She was already on the mat when Caleb walked in, not a trace of her former executive stiffness. No fanfare, no assistant holding a clipboard, just her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, simple workout clothes, sweat already beading on her forehead, a testament to her unyielding solo efforts before he arrived. "I couldn't sleep," she said without looking up, her voice a little breathless, yet resolute, her eyes focused inward. "So I started early. My body wouldn't let me rest, Caleb. It was too noisy with new sensations." Caleb dropped his duffel bag, a soft thud on the mat, smiled faintly, and sat beside her, his calming presence filling the space. "That's not surprising, Miss Ward," he said, his voice calm, understanding. "Hope is noisy when it's been quiet too long. It demands attention. It's a roar that has been suppressed." She gave him a sidelong glance, a hint of her old, dry sharpness. "You practice these quotes in the mirror, Mr. Miller, or do they just flow out of you?" "Nope," he chuckled, a genuine, unburdened sound. "I just live with a 7-year-old philosopher who sleeps with a half-blind doll and tells me that broken things still matter. She's my greatest teacher." Tiffany chuckled, a soft, warm sound that felt foreign but welcome in her chest, a genuine ripple of mirth. She shook her head. "I think your daughter might be smarter than both of us combined, Caleb." He nodded, a proud, tender smile on his face. "She is, and I'm incredibly grateful for it." They started with core work, gentle movements designed to reconnect her mind to the deep, stabilizing muscles she had long neglected. Controlled tension, micro shifts, subtle movements most people wouldn't even notice, but Tiffany noticed everything now. Every flicker of muscle memory, every whisper of sensation where silence and numbness used to live, a profound reawakening of her somatic self. Caleb guided her carefully, watching for fatigue, for any sign of her old retreat into helplessness. But Tiffany pushed past it, her jaw clenched, her eyes blazing with a fierce new determination that radiated from her very core. At one point, he reached out instinctively to steady her during a particularly challenging balance exercise, her body swaying precariously, and she surprised him. "No," she said, breathless but firm, a flash of defiant independence in her eyes. "Let me fall if I need to, Caleb. I have to know what I can catch, what I can do, entirely on my own." He backed off, nodded, respecting her crucial boundary, and watched as she wobbled precariously, then, with a tiny, fierce, almost primal adjustment, corrected herself. A minuscule movement. But she stayed up, and her face, sweat-streaked and fierce, broke into a grin so bright it felt like a sunrise, illuminating the entire room with her triumph. After the session, they sat on the floor with water bottles, silent, stretching comfortably between them, the shared quiet now easy, companionable, filled with unspoken understanding. Tiffany glanced down at her legs, bare now beneath simple black shorts, her eyes filled with a new, raw curiosity, almost a sense of rediscovery. "I don't know who this woman is," she said softly, gesturing to her own body, as if observing a stranger. "This one fighting back, this one feeling again." Caleb looked at her, his gaze unwavering, full of gentle understanding. "I do, Tiffany. She's the woman who finally gave herself permission to be whole, to be herself again." "She's not Tiffany Ward, CEO," Tiffany mused, a faint sadness still in her voice, acknowledging the loss of that former identity. "No," Caleb agreed. "And she's not a victim either." "Nope," she confirmed, a new strength in her voice. She looked at him, eyes shimmering with unshed tears and a fragile, dawning hope. "Then who is she, Caleb? Truly? This person I'm becoming?" He smiled, a profound, knowing smile. "She's becoming, Tiffany. And that's the most powerful thing of all. The journey is the destination." That afternoon, they moved to the terrace, a private, secluded space that offered sweeping views of the city. Caleb suggested something different for the next phase. Water therapy, he explained, gesturing towards the discreetly placed portable plunge pool that stood in a corner, already filled and heated. I had it brought in, Tiffany explained, anticipating his question, a flash of her old efficiency returning. I figured if I was going to relearn how to stand, how to trust my body without the fear of a hard fall, I might as well do it somewhere the fall doesn't hurt, where it doesn't matter if I fail initially. Caleb nodded, genuinely impressed by her foresight and proactive spirit. That's smart, Miss Ward. Incredibly strategic. No, she said, a new lightness in her voice, a genuine joy. That's freeing, Caleb. Truly freeing. She wore a sleek black one-piece swimsuit, her arms toned from weeks of effort, her posture still elegant, but imbued with a new fluidity. She slipped into the water slowly, gripping the edge for support, testing the unfamiliar buoyancy, the gentle embrace of the water. Caleb stood beside the pool, giving her space, a watchful, reassuring presence. Water remembers things we forget, Tiffany, he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper, as if sharing a sacred secret. How to float, how to move without fear, how to feel weightless again, how to trust your own instinct, your natural grace. She closed her eyes and sank deeper, letting the warmth soak into her bones, letting the water embrace her, hold her, support her. For a while, she just floated, arms out, face to the sky, a profound sense of weightlessness and release washing over her. A return to a primordial state of being. Then she began to kick gently, tentatively, then stronger, her legs moving freely, gracefully, like they'd been waiting for permission, for this exact moment of liberation, of rediscovery. You see that, Tiffany? Caleb said, his voice filled with quiet triumph, a shared joy. Tiffany laughed, a joyous, uninhibited sound that echoed across the terrace, a pure, unfettered expression of delight. I think I'm swimming, Caleb. I'm actually swimming for the first time in forever. You are. She kicked again, stronger this time, propelling herself through the water with increasing confidence. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. They were tears of pure, unadulterated joy, of profound gratitude. I forgot what it felt like to be alive in my own body, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, a raw confession. And now she turned to him, her face radiant, illuminated by the setting sun. Now I feel like I'm not borrowing someone else's life anymore. This is mine. This body is mine again. That evening, after the exhilarating water therapy session and the profound realization of reclaiming her own body, a body that now felt truly hers again, Tiffany did something entirely unexpected. Over tea in the sunroom, as the last golden light of dusk faded from the city skyline, painting the distant skyscrapers in hues of orange and purple, she handed Caleb an envelope. It was crisp and weighty, with her corporate logo subtly embossed on the back, a symbol of her old world meeting her new truth. What's this? He asked, surprised, knowing her aversion to personal gifts and her fiercely guarded privacy. She didn't answer, just offered a small, serene smile that held a newfound peace, a quiet contentment that radiated from within. He opened it slowly, the rustle of the paper unnervingly loud in the quiet room. Inside, nestled beneath a tissue-thin sheet of personalized stationery, was a handwritten note, penned in elegant script, addressed not to him, but to Emma, to the woman who didn't believe in dolls until one saved her life. P.S. Lucy's new ear is holding up beautifully. Thank you, Emma, for showing me the true meaning of brokenness and beauty, and for reminding me what it means to truly care, without judgment or expectation. The words, heartfelt and sincere, brought a lump to Caleb's throat. Below the heartfelt note was a check, substantial in amount, breathtakingly generous, made out to the Hope Foundation for Family Healing. This was the non-profit Caleb had once dreamed of starting, a quiet aspiration he'd shared with Kara in hushed whispers late at night, but never had the means or the time to fully build. It wasn't a small amount. It was everything, a sum that could turn a wistful dream into a tangible reality, a sanctuary for families struggling with unseen wounds, just like Kara's had been. He looked at her, stunned, his jaw slack with disbelief and overwhelming gratitude, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. Tiffany, I can't take this. This is too much. This is everything I ever dreamed of. She smiled, serene, utterly at peace, her eyes holding his with a profound understanding that transcended their different worlds, a silent acknowledgement of the debt of gratitude she felt. You already have, Caleb. Every time you walked through my door and didn't give up on me. Every time you made me look at myself, truly look. Every time you pushed me beyond my fear, beyond my pride. That, Caleb, was repayment. It cannot be measured in dollars, but in dignity. He shook his head, voice tight with emotion, tears pricking at the corners of his eyes, an unfamiliar vulnerability. Tiffany, It's not charity, she said, cutting him off gently, anticipating his thought, recognizing his fierce independence. It's repayment. For what, you ask? He met her eyes, a profound, undeniable connection flowing between them. For showing me that I wasn't paralyzed. Just paused. And that the pause, Caleb, is finally over. For showing me how to restart. Later that night, Caleb sat at his tiny kitchen table, the substantial check, a symbol of hope and transformation, still in his hand. Emma was fast asleep in the next room, her soft snores a comforting, familiar presence. He reread Tiffany's beautiful note to Emma again, the child's simple wisdom echoing Kara's own profound insights, a legacy of empathy. Then he picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen, and texted Tiffany 2 words, simply, profoundly. You're walking. She replied instantly, the glow of her screen a beacon in the darkness. Not yet, but I'm dancing in my dreams, Caleb, and I'm ready for the next song, ready to dance in the light. The next morning, fueled by that renewed spirit, by the promise of her dream, she walked 2 full steps in the water, unassisted, her legs moving with a newfound grace, a conscious, deliberate act of defiance against her past. She smiled through the tears that streamed down her face, tears of pure joy and profound relief, not because she had reached the end, but because for the first time in her life, she was finally starting from the right beginning, armed with courage and an unexpected, beautiful alliance. The gala was glittering, a loud and breathtaking spectacle in that way only immense wealth and meticulous planning could orchestrate. Crystal chandeliers, suspended from the soaring ceiling, dripped with refracted light, casting a diamond-like shimmer across the grand ballroom. Live string quartets filled the air with elegant melodies that barely cut through the excited hum of conversation, a luxurious cacophony of social exchange. Waiters in impeccably tailored tuxedos moved with silent shoes, gliding effortlessly through the throng, serving champagne in delicate flutes and gourmet canapés on silver trays. It was the annual fundraiser for spinal injury research, Tiffany Ward's Foundation's largest and most public event, a high-stakes affair surrounded by whispers, flashing headlines, and half-hearted smiles from donors who, despite their generous contributions, still looked at her with a mixture of pity and admiration for a woman they viewed as tragically imprisoned by her chair. They didn't know the full truth of her journey. Not yet, but tonight they would. Caleb stood unobtrusively at the back of the grand ballroom, feeling utterly out of place in a borrowed suit that, while clean and pressed, didn't quite fit his broad shoulders, but somehow made him look even more authentically himself, unvarnished, real, and powerfully grounded. Emma held his hand, a beacon of innocent purity in a world of artifice, wearing a simple blue dress with mismatched socks, a personal fashion statement that defied convention, and a glittering sticker name tag that boldly declared hope, a silent, unwavering testament to her belief in the unseen and the possible. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging his sleeve, her eyes wide with wonder at the dazzling display of opulence, her head tilted back to take it all in, a child in awe. "She looks like a queen, Daddy." Caleb smiled, a warm, tender expression, his gaze fixed on Tiffany, who was gracefully navigating the room in her wheelchair, a vision in navy blue. "She is, Emma. She truly is. Tonight, more than ever." Midway through the evening, after the initial mingling and a few obligatory speeches by board members, Tiffany was asked to say a few words. It was tradition, a customary part of the program. People expected something polished, rehearsed, professionally distant, a thank you to the generous donors, a brief update on the Foundation's research, a stoic, elegant acceptance of her fate and her role as the patron of the paralyzed. But she had other plans, a radical departure from the carefully scripted narrative, a moment of profound, unscripted truth. As her assistant, a nervous young woman named Sarah, whose hands trembled slightly, reached for the microphone to hand it to her. Tiffany held up a hand, a subtle but firm gesture that commanded immediate attention, silencing the assistant mid-motion. "No," she said quietly, her voice carrying a surprising resonance across the murmuring room, a calm that demanded attention and respect, a quiet authority that cut through the background hum. "I'll walk." The assistant froze, her eyes wide with shock and immediate concern, her jaw slack with disbelief, unable to process the words. "Miss Ward, are you sure? The stage is quite high, and the steps are—" Tiffany turned her head, her gaze meeting Sarah's with an unyielding resolve that brooked no argument, no hesitation, no doubt. "Yes, Sarah, I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. It's time." And then, slowly, deliberately, her movements imbued with a profound, almost spiritual grace, she placed both hands on the arms of her custom-made wheelchair. Every eye in the room, which had been tracking her every movement with discreet curiosity, widened in collective astonishment. A collective gasp, barely suppressed, rippled through the audience. With a singular, monumental effort, a visible clenching of her jaw, she pushed herself up. Her muscles, strained but resolute, responded, a deep tremor running through her frame. She stood. The grand ballroom fell into an instantaneous, profound, almost sacred silence, the string quartet faltering mid-note, the excited conversations dying on hundreds of lips, leaving only the sound of a collective intake of breath. Not just a hush, but the kind of silence that chokes sound out of the air and turns time into brittle glass, shattering all expectations, all preconceived notions of who she was. 2, 3, 4 seconds passed, each one an eternity, filled only with the deafening beat of hundreds of hearts. Then, with a visible tremor, but with an iron will forged in weeks of agonizing effort, she took a step. Another. Her heels, elegant and slender, clicked softly against the polished marble stage, each sound echoing like a drumbeat of defiance, a triumphant heartbeat resonating through the stunned room. No one moved, no one breathed. Every gaze was riveted, utterly captivated, a collective disbelief turning into awe. By the time she reached the podium, her body trembling visibly with the immense effort, her muscles screaming in protest, but impeccably upright, graceful despite the strain, her head held high, every single eye in the room, bankers, surgeons, tech billionaires, influencers, socialites, and cynical journalists alike, was riveted on her. They were watching the woman who once sat among them in silence, a symbol of their charitable efforts, now a living, breathing embodiment of raw courage and miraculous rebirth. She adjusted the microphone, her hands shaking slightly, but her gaze was steady, piercing, meeting the sea of astonished faces with unwavering strength. A faint, genuine smile, not of arrogance but of profound liberation, touched her lips, a smile that reached her eyes fully. "There was a time," she began, her voice clear, strong, resonating with a newfound strength that filled the vast room, carrying every word to the farthest corners, "when I believed that standing still was strength. That remaining composed, untouchable, in absolute control, was power." The room remained frozen, a tableau of stunned disbelief, absorbing her raw honesty, her unexpected vulnerability. "But stillness is not strength," she continued, her gaze sweeping across the faces in the crowd, holding each one, forcing them to meet her eyes, challenging their very perceptions, their comfortable assumptions. "It's fear, disguised in silk and marble. It's a cage, however gilded, however luxurious, a prison of my own making." A collective gasp rippled through the back rows, a murmur of shock and dawning comprehension, as if a veil had been suddenly, irrevocably lifted from their eyes. Tiffany pressed on, her voice gaining momentum, shedding layers of pretense and self-deception, utterly exposed yet radiating an undeniable, potent power that held them all captive. "I spent 5 years in a wheelchair, not because I couldn't walk, physically. The doctors confirmed that. My body, structurally, was capable. But because I was afraid to feel what it would cost me to try. I was afraid of falling, afraid of failing, afraid of being seen, truly seen, in my vulnerability, in my pain, in my struggle. Afraid of judgment, I built walls higher than my healing. I made my pain look like elegance. I made my silence look like dignity." A profound, heartbreaking pause, as the weight of her raw confession settled upon the audience, a shared, collective breath held in the suddenly heavy air. "And it nearly killed me. The silence, the pretense, the lie I told myself and the world." From the side of the room, Caleb stood utterly still, watching her, his chest tight with overwhelming emotion, his eyes glossy with unshed tears of pride, relief, and profound awe. He knew every word, every nuance, every battle she had fought to stand there. Emma, still holding his hand, looked up at him, then back at Tiffany, her small face filled with wonder, a quiet knowing that this was her sad lady finding her smile, finding her voice, finding her strength. Tiffany's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the podium, but her voice never broke, never wavered, a testament to her fierce, indomitable will. "Tonight, I'm not here as a donor or a CEO or even merely a survivor. I'm here as a woman who finally remembered her own name. Not the one on the headlines, not the one carved onto office doors, but the one whispered back to her in moments of stillness, by a janitor with calloused hands and a little girl with a broken doll. The one only Hope knows how to say, when all other voices have fallen silent. She took a deep, resonant breath, her chest expanding with a profound sense of liberation, her eyes sparkling with unshed tears of joy. And if I may leave you with anything tonight, if there's one truth I can offer, it's this. Healing doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't ask for perfect conditions or a guarantee of success. It only asks for one brave, foolish moment when you choose to try, when you choose to reclaim yourself utterly and fiercely, regardless of what the world says or what it expects. The room erupted. Applause like thunder, a tidal wave of emotion crashing over them. Tears streamed down faces. Standing ovations from every table, a powerful, overwhelming expression of genuine awe, shared humanity, and inspiration. But Tiffany, in that moment, didn't hear any of it. Her gaze, bypassing the flashing cameras and the adoring crowds, was locked on Emma, beaming, with both hands in the air. A pure, unadulterated celebration of her sad lady standing tall. And then she looked at Caleb, who caught her eye, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek, and mouthed, "You did it, Tiffany. You absolutely did it. You walked." She nodded, a silent, profound understanding passing between them, a shared victory that transcended all else, a quiet promise of a future finally claimed. "We did it, Caleb. We did." The grand ballroom, still vibrating with the aftershocks of Tiffany's speech, was now a cacophony of celebratory noise, but for Tiffany, a profound stillness had descended. The thunderous applause, the multitude of standing ovations, the tear-streaked faces in the crowd, the clamor of journalists pressing forward, all of it seemed to fade into a distant hum, a peripheral blur. In that moment, all she truly heard was the echo of her own voice, resonating with a newfound truth, and all she truly saw were two faces. Emma's, beaming with unadulterated joy, her small hands raised in a pure, innocent triumph, a mirror of her unburdened spirit, and Caleb's, his eyes glossy with unshed tears, a silent, powerful testament to their shared, arduous journey. When he mouthed, "You did it," and she nodded, mouthing back, "We did." The profound understanding that passed between them was a bond far stronger than any words, more precious than any amount of wealth or fleeting recognition in the room. It was a victory, not just of the body, but of the soul. After the initial whirlwind of congratulatory embraces, the relentless flash of cameras, and the eager, often intrusive questions from journalists whom she now chose to acknowledge on her own terms, with a calm authority, Tiffany found herself on the quiet, empty terrace overlooking the city. The cool, crisp night air was a welcome balm against the residual heat of her triumph, a cleansing breath after years of suffocating pretense and self-imprisonment. With a sigh of profound relief, she pulled off her elegant heels, feeling the last vestiges of tension drain from her feet, and sat on the edge of the low stone ledge, her legs dangling freely, a simple, liberating act of normalcy she hadn't experienced in 5 long, agonizing years. Caleb joined her, his presence a steady, comforting anchor in the silence, handing her a steaming cup of herbal tea. "You're full of surprises, Miss Ward," he said quietly, a genuine warmth in his voice, his own relief palpable, mixing with admiration. She smirked, a hint of her old self, sharp and witty, mixed now with a new lightness, a genuine playfulness. "And yet, Mr. Miller, are full of metaphors. Guess we're even, for now. A truce in our battle of words." They sat for a while without speaking, the city lights twinkling below them like scattered diamonds, a vast, indifferent universe against their intimate moment. Their silence was a comfortable, shared space, forged through vulnerability, trust, and the profound experience they had just navigated together. The sound of distant sirens, the muted hum of traffic, all seemed to create a rich, complex backdrop for their quiet, momentous conversation. Then Tiffany turned to him, her gaze soft, reflective, illuminated by the city glow, revealing a depth she had rarely shown. "When I stood up tonight, Caleb," she began, her voice a low murmur, filled with a raw, almost disbelieving honesty, "I didn't feel proud, not in the way I thought I would. I didn't feel strong, not like a conquering hero. I just felt free, utterly, profoundly free, as if a lifetime of invisible chains had simply dissolved, leaving me light, unburdened." Caleb nodded slowly, understanding the nuanced difference between outward triumph and internal liberation, the difference between perception and truth. "Freedom doesn't come from walking, Tiffany. It comes from deciding to stop sitting still. It comes from the choice, from within, to shed the weight you carry, the walls you've built." "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper, a correction offered with gentle conviction. It comes from deciding to stop sitting still, and from having someone to stand with you when you make that terrifying choice. Someone who held the light. A gentle breeze picked up, rustling the hem of her navy gown, stirring the loose strands of hair around her face. A symbolic breath of new life, a whisper of infinite possibilities. She looked over at him, something new in her expression, unshielded, soft, and profoundly vulnerable, yet radiating a quiet, undeniable strength he had helped awaken. "You know what the scariest part of tonight was, Caleb?" she asked, her voice tinged with a lingering awe at her own courage, at the sheer magnitude of what she had done. "What, Tiffany? After all the years, all the pain you've endured, all the battles you've fought?" "It worked," she whispered, her voice almost incredulous, filled with a disbelief that still clung to her, a ghost of her past. My legs moved. My body listened. It actually worked. After all this time, all the doubt, all the medical opinions, it actually worked. Caleb's voice was quiet, filled with a gentle correction, a profound truth that resonated between them. "You mean you worked, Tiffany? You fought? Your spirit commanded, and your body, finally, after years of silent protest, obeyed. You unlocked yourself." She exhaled slowly, a long, shaky breath, releasing years of pent-up emotion, of unspoken fears. Then she asked, just above a whisper, her eyes searching his, filled with a profound yearning, a desperate need for connection. "Can I tell you something I haven't said in a very long time, Caleb? To anyone, not even to myself, not even in my darkest moments?" He turned to her fully, his eyes warm, inviting, completely open, offering a safe harbor. "Anything, Tiffany. Anything at all. I'm here." She leaned her head against his shoulder, a tentative, almost imperceptible gesture of surrender and trust, a profound intimacy she hadn't allowed herself in years, perhaps ever. And for the first time since her fall, since Harrison's betrayal, she let someone else hold the immense weight she no longer wanted to carry alone. "I'm tired," she whispered, her voice raw, thick with emotion, a confession born from the deepest part of her soul, of standing alone, of being alone in this fight. In the quiet intimacy of that moment, under the vast, indifferent city sky, a new chapter, not just of healing, but of connection, of shared burdens and nascent hope, began to unfurl between them. It was a moment of profound, mutual vulnerability and an unspoken promise. 3 days after the gala, the video of Tiffany Ward's speech had gone undeniably viral, a global phenomenon that transcended corporate circles. The moment she stood, the profound silence that descended upon the room, her voice measured, trembling, yet unflinchingly honest. It wasn't just a speech. It was a resurrection, a public confession, a profound act of defiance and vulnerability that captivated millions across the world. Every major news outlet picked it up, from wheelchair to warrior. Tiffany Ward's stand stuns the world to CEO or survivor. Tiffany Ward redefines both, and healing caught on camera, an executive's journey to reclaiming her life. Her journey of healing, previously a private agony, now a global sensation, became a beacon of hope for countless others facing their own unseen battles. But for Tiffany, amidst all the external clamor, none of it truly mattered like the quiet that followed. She sat in her sunroom, no longer in a wheelchair, but with bare feet tucked comfortably under her, wearing no makeup, dressed in a simple, soft sweater, sipping coffee from a chipped mug she hadn't used since grad school, a tangible symbol of her past, now embraced and integrated into her present. The world outside was buzzing, her inbox overflowing with interview requests, her foundation receiving record donations, but her eyes weren't on the headlines. They were fixed on a message from her mother, a woman who had, for years, kept her distance, scarred by Tiffany's self-imposed isolation and the public drama surrounding her fall. "You stood taller than I've ever seen you, my daughter," the message read, "and you didn't even need heels. I'm proud of the woman I once feared I lost, but who has finally found her way back to herself. Welcome home, my dear." Tiffany stared at the words, blinked once, and let them soak into the deep, aching spaces that even years of therapy had never fully reached. It was a healing balm, a profound validation, a reconnection more precious than any award or corporate accolade. Later that afternoon, she met Caleb at a small non-profit clinic he'd been volunteering with, the Nascent Hope Center. It was now operating out of a borrowed church basement, a humble but bustling space filled with the sounds of quiet conversation and gentle movement, until their new building, fueled by Tiffany's generous donation, was finished. "You're early," he said, a warm smile on his face as she walked in, a cane in her hand. Not for dependence, but for rhythm, a gentle guide, a silent acknowledgement of her ongoing, conscious journey. "I'm learning," she replied, her voice light, imbued with a genuine joy she rarely showed publicly, a genuine authenticity. "To stop making the world wait on me. To move at my own pace, not its demanding rhythm. To live for myself." He smiled, a hint of his dry humor. "Still dramatic, Miss Ward, even in your humility." "Old habits die hard, Mr. Miller," she smirked, a flash of her old wit returning, but softened by warmth and self-awareness. They walked through the bustling, makeshift space together. Bare floors, scuffed chairs, paint peeling from the ceiling. It was raw, unpolished, yet there was a palpable light in the corners, a vibrant warmth in the walls, a kind of purpose that couldn't be bought with any amount of money, only built with heart, with dedication, with shared belief. Caleb showed her a small room where a teenage girl in a neck brace was laughing with a nurse over a puzzle, a moment of pure, unadulterated joy that cut through the clinical setting. "She hasn't smiled in a week," he said softly, his voice filled with compassion. "Until now. This place, this connection, it works, Tiffany. It truly works. It brings hope where there was none." Tiffany looked around, her gaze lingering on the girl, a profound understanding in her eyes, recognizing a flicker of her past self in the child's vulnerability, a mirror of her own journey. "What would it cost?" she asked, her voice thoughtful, her mind already shifting from personal healing to strategic planning, from individual triumph to collective impact, to build something permanent, something truly transformative, a sanctuary for real, holistic healing, not just a temporary fix. A place where this kind of hope can flourish indefinitely, reaching countless others? He raised a brow, surprised by her immediate, pragmatic shift from personal healing to a grander, collective vision, but a deep pride swelled in his chest. More than a viral moment, Tiffany. More than a single large donation. It would require sustained effort, a dedicated community, a shared, unwavering vision, and a lot of hands-on work. It would require a lifetime. She turned to face him, her eyes bright with a fierce new determination, a powerful resolve that reflected her corporate titan past, now repurposed for a higher cause. "Then it's a good thing, Caleb," she said, a confident, knowing smile spreading across her face, a promise made and kept, "that I'm no longer living in moments. I'm building a legacy. Our legacy. Together." The quiet architect had found her grand design, a purpose that transcended even her wildest dreams, and she was ready to construct it brick by brick, with him by her side, building a future where no one would feel unseen, unheard, or unfixable. That evening, Tiffany appeared on a nationally syndicated talk show. It was a soft chair and hard questions kind of interview, a carefully orchestrated dance between vulnerability and resilience, a public reckoning with her past, now transformed into a powerful narrative. The host, a seasoned veteran known for her probing yet empathetic style, leaned in, her gaze direct, capturing the attention of millions. "People are calling this a miracle, Miss Ward. Your public return to walking, your very visible transformation. Would you agree with that label?" Tiffany smiled faintly, a genuine warmth in her eyes, a serenity that hadn't been there before, replacing her usual guardedness. "I'd call it something harder than a miracle," she stated, her voice clear and strong. "I'd call it work. Hard, brutal, profound work. A conscious choice every single day to fight for myself." Applause rippled through the studio audience, acknowledging the raw honesty, the undeniable effort. "But you were told you'd never walk again, medically speaking, by the most renowned specialists in the world," the host continued, pressing gently, yet insistently. "How did you find the strength to defy all those expert prognoses, to overcome such a daunting, seemingly irreversible diagnosis?" Her answer was quiet but firm, resonating with authentic power, a truth she had discovered in the depths of her despair. "The strength wasn't in my legs alone. It was in letting someone see me when I was too ashamed to see myself. It was in trusting another when I had lost all trust in myself, in my body, in the world. It was in allowing someone to hold the light for me." A pause, charged with unspoken emotion, holding the audience captive, leaning forward. "And who was that someone, Miss Ward? The world is desperate to know this unsung hero, this catalyst for your profound change." She looked straight at the camera, her eyes unwavering, a profound gratitude shining within them, a silent, powerful acknowledgement of the man who waited for her, who had believed in her when she couldn't. A janitor with calloused hands, a grieving heart, and more wisdom than every specialist I'd ever hired combined. A man named Caleb Miller, who taught me that broken things are still people, and that silence, if embraced as a shield, can become a form of self-betrayal. The clip, a concise 2-minute segment of pure, unadulterated truth, rapidly became a global sensation, racking up over 20 million views in 2 days. Not because it was merely dramatic or sensational, but because it was undeniably true, profoundly authentic, and spoke to a universal human yearning for healing and redemption. And in a world full of curated perfection, manufactured narratives, and carefully constructed images, truth, raw and unadorned, always cuts through with unparalleled power, captivating hearts and minds, inspiring hope. The world was watching, listening, finally seeing Tiffany Ward, not as a symbol of tragedy or corporate power, but as a living, breathing testament to the human spirit's capacity for healing, defiance, and radical vulnerability. On a cool, crisp Saturday morning, Tiffany visited a local elementary school where Emma's class was hosting a community day. The air buzzed with the happy chatter of children and the gentle murmur of parents. Caleb hadn't told her Emma had invited her personally, with a hand-drawn card adorned with glitter and crayon, its childlike script earnest and endearing that simply read, "You're my walking hero, Miss Tiffany. Come see my project." Tiffany laughed, a soft, joyful sound when she saw it, a profound tenderness welling within her heart, a warmth that chased away the lingering chill of the morning. Now standing by the bake sale table, amidst the cheerful chaos of children and parents, the sweet scent of freshly baked cookies filling the air, she felt awkward in a way she hadn't since college, before her armor of corporate invincibility had been forged, before she learned to command every room with an iron will. This was a different kind of world, one unconcerned with stock prices or market shares, a world of genuine, unvarnished connection and simple joys. "So, this is where your newfound fame brought you, Miss Ward," Caleb teased gently, handing her a lemon poppy seed cupcake, a small act of shared normalcy. "I was promised luxury." She took a bite, savoring the simple sweetness, her smile genuine and unforced. "Instead, I got lemon poppy seed, and honesty, and pure, unadulterated joy. Much better, actually. Far more fulfilling." Emma, a whirlwind of bright energy, her cheeks flushed with excitement, ran up with Lucy, the doll clutched firmly in her arms, her eyes sparkling. Miss Tiffany, can I show you my project now? Please, please, please." Tiffany knelt down slowly, gracefully, her movements fluid and unassisted, a profound symbol of her journey. No wheelchair, no assistant, just her, meeting the child at eye level, her heart full. She smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "Lead the way, Emma. I'm all ears, and I've heard you have quite the hero in your class." Inside, taped to the brightly decorated classroom wall, amidst other colorful drawings, was Emma's masterpiece, a vibrant drawing of a stick figure, rendered with a child's artistic charm, standing up triumphantly from a chair. Above it, in crooked, earnest handwriting, were the words, "Sometimes heroes don't wear capes, they wear courage. And sometimes they just help people walk again." Tiffany blinked, a wave of profound emotion washing over her, and hugged Emma fiercely, tightly, before the tears could reach her mouth. A silent, heartfelt thank you that conveyed a lifetime of gratitude. As the community day wound down, the late afternoon sun casting long, golden shadows across the schoolyard, Tiffany and Caleb walked the empty sidewalk back to his car. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft fire, a breathtaking panorama of orange, pink, and purple, reflecting the vibrant new hues of Tiffany's life. "Do you regret it?" he asked suddenly, his voice low, breaking the comfortable, easy silence they now shared. The speech, the spotlight, exposing so much of yourself to the world, opening yourself up to judgment again. She shook her head, her gaze fixed on the fiery horizon, her silhouette sharp against the dramatic sky, but her spirit unburdened. "No, Caleb, not a single moment. I regret staying silent for so long. I regret believing the lie that my truth made me weaker. It was the silence, the pretense, that was the real weakness, the true prison." Caleb nodded slowly, understanding the profound personal cost she had paid, and the liberation she had found in speaking her truth. "You've changed a lot, Tiffany. More than just walking." She smiled, turning to him, her eyes reflecting the last, warm rays of the sun, brimming with life and a newfound serenity. "Only by finally stopping hiding, Caleb. By finally letting go of who I thought I had to be, who the world expected me to be. By choosing to be real, authentically me." They reached his car, but neither made a move to get in. Instead, Tiffany turned to him fully, serious now, her gaze intense and unwavering, filled with a deep, unspoken question, a profound yearning. "I never said thank you, Caleb. Not properly. For everything. For truly saving me. You don't have to, Tiffany, he replied softly, his heart full, his voice thick with emotion, a gentle refusal. You're walking, your smile, your new life, that's enough. That's my reward, my greatest satisfaction. I do, she insisted, stepping closer, her voice thick with emotion, trembling slightly with the weight of her feelings. Not just for what you helped me do, for helping me stand again, but for who you reminded me I still was. For seeing the real me, beyond the brokenness, beyond the silence, beyond the chair. She stepped closer again, almost imperceptibly, bridging the last vestiges of distance between them, entering his personal space, a profound act of trust and intimacy. And Caleb, she whispered, her voice fragile, infused with a profound vulnerability she had only just discovered, a yearning she had kept locked away for half a decade. I don't want to walk alone anymore. I don't want to live alone anymore. I want to build that legacy with you. His breath caught in his throat, his eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and overwhelming hope, a sudden, powerful realization. You sure, Tiffany? He asked, his voice barely a whisper, laced with a tremor of profound emotion. She nodded, her voice steady, resolute, infused with a new, profound certainty that echoed the sunrise. Because for the first time in my life, Caleb, I know exactly where I'm going, and I want you there with me. Always. And without another word, she leaned forward. No rush, no fear, no hesitation. And kissed him. It wasn't a spark, not a sudden, explosive flame that consumes everything in an instant. It was a sunrise, something quiet, steady, warm, infinitely gentle, slowly illuminating the horizon, promising a new day, a new beginning. Something that said, this is how new stories begin. This is how healing becomes love. This is how two broken souls find their way home, together, building a shared future. A profound, beautiful beginning born from shared brokenness, unwavering faith, and newfound hope. The grand opening of the Hope Center drew a crowd that surprised everyone, especially Caleb. He stood at the edge of the bustling parking lot, the asphalt still damp from a morning shower, watching car after car pull in, a continuous stream of people. Volunteers in bright, custom-designed T-shirts, emblazoned with the new Hope Center logo, rushed to direct traffic and guide guests. Media vans, their satellite dishes extended, unloaded camera equipment and reporters, eager to capture the next chapter of Tiffany Ward's inspiring story. Children, their faces bright with curiosity, tugged excitedly at their parents' hands toward the brightly painted entrance, a beacon of promise. The air thrummed with anticipation and a palpable sense of community, a vibrant energy that hummed with a purpose greater than mere spectacle. Half the town's here, Caleb murmured, a quiet awe in his voice, still processing the sheer scale of the event, the tangible manifestation of their dream. Half the state, maybe, Tiffany said from beside him, a proud, serene smile on her face, her eyes reflecting the growing crowd. She was radiant in a simple ivory blouse and tailored trousers, walking confidently, no cane in hand, her movements fluid and strong. Her hair was loose, catching the morning sun, cascading around her shoulders, her posture imbued with a new, quiet grace and unshakable poise. Caleb looked at her, his heart full, witnessing her complete transformation. You nervous? He asked, a gentle tease, sensing the gravity of the moment. She smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. I used to be scared of the silence in a room, Caleb. Now I just listen for the heartbeat. And this place? It's full of them. A symphony of hope. He chuckled, a deep, resonant sound, his smile mirroring hers. You always talk like a poet at 9 a.m., Miss Ward, especially on an opening day. Only on the days that matter, Mr. Miller, she said softly, her gaze meeting his, holding it with profound intimacy. And this one does, more than any other moment in my life. Inside, the new center pulsed with vibrant life. The air smelled of fresh paint, polished wood, and, undeniably, hope. Colorful murals, vibrant and inspiring, lined the freshly painted walls, each telling a story of resilience. One, particularly striking, drawn by local children under Emma's enthusiastic direction, depicted a little girl holding hands with a woman who is gracefully rising from a wheelchair, her arms outstretched towards the light, a powerful symbol of overcoming. Beneath it, a quote in bold, elegant letters, chosen by Emma herself, read, "Healing isn't about returning to who you were. It's about becoming who you were meant to be." Tiffany had painted it herself, her artistic talent, long dormant, reawakened in the service of their shared vision, adding a personal touch to the collective message. Caleb stood near the brightly colored ribbon, Tiffany now by his side, her hand resting lightly on his arm as he held the ceremonial oversized scissors. "Ready?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion, a profound sense of shared accomplishment washing over him. She nodded, her eyes clear, filled with a joyful anticipation that sparkled like the morning dew. But before he could cut the ribbon, she touched his hand gently, a soft, intimate gesture that paused the momentous occasion, drawing all eyes to her. "Wait," she whispered. Tiffany stepped forward and took the mic, her voice steady and clear, carrying effortlessly through the eager, hushed crowd. "Before we officially open these doors," she began, her gaze sweeping across the hundreds of faces gathered, a sea of hope and expectation. "I just want to say something simple and true, something I learned the hard way, but that has utterly transformed my life." She paused, letting her words sink in, the anticipation palpable, electric. "This center, this beautiful place of healing and possibility, it doesn't exist because of donations or viral media coverage, though those were certainly instrumental and deeply appreciated. It exists because a man who mopped floors believed in something louder than silence, and he gave that belief a name." The crowd stilled, hushed, leaning forward, utterly captivated. He gave it hope. He gave it purpose. He gave it a voice. He gave it a heart. Caleb's jaw tightened, his eyes suddenly glassy with unshed tears, completely overwhelmed by her public declaration, by her unwavering belief in him, revealed before the world. And he didn't do it to be noticed. He didn't do it for fame or fortune. He did it because that's what love does, quietly, persistently, selflessly, without asking for applause or recognition. That's what true empathy demands. She turned to him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears of gratitude and profound love, illuminated by the bright morning sun. "Caleb Miller, you didn't just help me walk. You helped me live. You helped me become who I was meant to be, a woman capable of loving and being loved." The scissors dropped to the ribbon with a soft clatter, severing it cleanly. Caleb reached for her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers, and together they pulled the grand, new doors open, symbolically ushering in an era of healing. Children ran in first, their joyous shouts echoing through the halls. Families followed, their faces alight with hope and excitement. Reporters snapped photos, capturing the profound moment for posterity. Somewhere in the background, out of sight but audible, someone started playing an old piano they'd salvaged from a closed-down rec center. A simple, heartfelt melody filling the air, a soundtrack to new beginnings. Just outside the main hall, on the sun-drenched balcony that overlooked the sprawling city, Tiffany found herself standing alone for a moment, absorbing the overwhelming emotions of the day, until Caleb joined her. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her gently closer. "Nice speech, Miss Ward," he said quietly, a proud, tender smile on his face. "Thanks," she replied, a genuine, unburdened laugh escaping her lips. "I winged it. All of it. From the heart." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the wind lifting her hair, the sound of children laughing echoing joyously through the halls below, a symphony of rediscovered life. Then Tiffany turned to him, her eyes soft and shimmering, reflecting the city lights, brimming with a deep affection. "You know, Caleb, the first time I saw you, I honestly thought you were just a janitor. An inconvenience, an absurd, misguided intrusion." Caleb raised an eyebrow playfully, a hint of amusement. "I was a janitor, Tiffany. That was my job, and my disguise." "No," she corrected, her voice warm, filled with a profound understanding that transcended their past roles. "You were more. You were a mirror, Caleb. And I didn't like what I saw in myself until you saw something different in me, until you saw something whole, something worth fighting for." He swallowed, his throat tight with emotion. "I just saw a woman with a fire in her eyes who didn't know she still had matches left. I just held the light, Tiffany. You struck the flame yourself." Tiffany laughed, a real, full, unguarded laugh, the sound of pure, unadulterated joy, resonating with a profound sense of self-acceptance. Then she held out her hand, extending an invitation that transcended words. "Dance with me, Caleb." He blinked, a moment of delightful disbelief. "There's no music, Tiffany. Not out here." "There's wind," she said, her voice soft. "There's light. There's life. There's our heartbeat. That's enough for our rhythm." They stepped into an open space on the balcony, her hand on his shoulder, his hand gently at her waist. And as they moved slowly, gracefully, almost in a waltz, their shadows twirled across the sun-drenched terrace, two figures who had once been broken, now whole in a way no diagnosis or past trauma could explain. "I never dreamed of this," she whispered. her head resting against his, her voice filled with wonder and a profound peace. "Me neither," he said, pulling her closer, his forehead resting against hers, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, a perfect synchronicity. "And yet, here we are. It wasn't a miracle, Tiffany, not in the traditional sense." "No," she whispered back, her voice thick with emotion. "It was love. A different kind of miracle, built on truth and courage and unwavering faith. A love that healed." Weeks passed. The world moved on, but something in the air had subtly shifted, a ripple effect from Tiffany's public vulnerability and Caleb's quiet strength. In a bustling diner across town, a tired waitress, catching a glimpse of Tiffany's story on a TV screen, decided to call her estranged mother again after years of silence, inspired by the message of reconciliation. In a hospital ward, a veteran who had given up on walking after a devastating injury requested to try physical therapy one more time, remembering Tiffany's defiant stand and renewed hope. And in a small bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, Emma fell asleep every night nestled comfortably between her dad and Tiffany, one small hand holding each of theirs, a perfect picture of their unconventional, loving, profoundly healed family. Caleb looked over at Tiffany, his heart full, and whispered, "She's going to be all right, isn't she? Our little philosopher." Tiffany smiled in the dark, her eyes soft, filled with a profound contentment. "She already is, Caleb. And so are we. We're all going to be more than all right. We're going to be free." Outside, the moon was full, a soft, benevolent light illuminating the city. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the promise of new beginnings. And inside, in that little room filled with healing, warmth, and shared dreams, 3 hearts beat in perfect time, no longer waiting to walk, but already dancing in the light, together, writing their own beautiful, unfolding story. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to breathe it in. Because sometimes it only takes one kind gesture, one unexpected encounter, one person willing to truly see another, to change a life forever. Where are you watching from? We'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Your stories matter, too. And if you enjoy meaningful tales like this, stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of the goodness and resilience in people, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Thank you for spending your time with us. Your presence means more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and remember, love can rewrite any ending.